Reagan and Lincoln tied for first. 23 presidents tied for second. Stay with me, stay with me. 17 other presidents tied for third. Jimmy Carter came in fourth, and Obama came in fifth. How dynamite is that? Oh my goodness. Well, let me tell you, all the news coming out and the budget, you all heard about it. It came out today, and tomorrow we're going to have some testimony in Washington. Nowhere.
Just living next door. When a neighbor's help is always just a phone call away, there's still a place where it's morning in America.
Welcome to Lyons.
Welcome to Lyons.
Welcome to Lyons.
Lyons is not just some place that you live or where you're from. It's a part of who you are.
A lot of special people in this town.
Old Doc Wolf was a special man.
Farmer turned doctor. He probably delivered half the people in this town.
When you needed help, you could always depend on Dr. Wolf. We loved him.
His son Milton grew up on the fender of his truck.
Now, my nephew Milton, he earned the calluses on his hands just like his dad did. The Wolfs have been dairy farmers for 3 generations. I was proud of Milton when he won that 1988 cow milking championship in Rice County. The Milton I knew on the farm, the same Milton I know today. Milton's a hard worker, a caring man, and has the Kansas conservative values that we all cherish. We were surprised that Milton decided to be a doctor.
He's always been very sharp, but maybe a little ornery.
The caring for people in their hour of need, well, that's in Milton's DNA.
Milton is a doctor, not a politician.
He spends his days saving lives like me.
And caring for Kansas families, not looking for ways to tax them or regulate them.
Milton lives Kansas conservative values. He doesn't just talk about them.
He understands that we're not going to change Washington until we change who we send to Washington.
I'm sure his dad would have been real proud.
Milton Wolf is a fighter.
People may know that Milton Wolf and Barack Obama are cousins.
And that Milton is the doctor that is leading the charge against Obamacare.
Traveling the country, speaking out. What people don't know is that Milton has paid a real price.
He's been called every name in the book.
His family has been threatened
The IRS harassed him.
just for speaking out.
The White House even tried to get him fired.
Still, Milton kept on fighting for what he believed in.
Milton Wolf is a fighter.
He's a fighter.
Well, that shouldn't surprise anyone.
After all, he's from Lyons.
America is in trouble because we've forgotten who we are. It's clear that both parties have let us down. But I'm not here to curse at the darkness. I'm here to light candles. I'm here to fight for America. There will always be 1,000 people who will tell you what you cannot do, and 1,000 more who will make excuses. But I have to believe that America can still be saved, and you have to believe it too. This eagle will soar again, with taxes that are fair, where everyone finally plays by the same set of rules, with a healthcare system that cares more about patients than politicians, but most importantly, with a government that relearns its place as servant rather than master. You and I have a new rendezvous in destiny. This is your country. This is your time. Join this revolution. Join me. Together we can do this.
Ladies and gentlemen of the revolution, please welcome your next senator from Kansas, Dr. Milton Wolf.
Thank you. Don't you guys wish you were from Lyons too? I gotta tell you something. something. They're going to say all kinds of things about me in this campaign. They already have, but one thing they will never be able to take away from me. I was the 1988 Rice County cow milking champion. In fact, I'd like to challenge Pat Roberts to a cow milking contest right now. You know, I have a confession to make. It's true. Barack Obama and I are cousins. I gotta tell you something, you can't choose your family. Yeah, you guys know that's true. You've been home for Thanksgiving and there's somebody there that you know you wouldn't have chosen. But I'll tell you what you can do. You can choose to rise up and stop your family from destroying America. And that's what I think Barack Obama is doing. I think Barack Obama's policies are destroying America, and I'm running for the United States Senate to put a stop to Barack Obama. Now, I tell you something, I'm a Republican. In fact, I'm a constitutional, conservative Republican. I've been loyal to our party my entire life. But the problem is, our party has not been loyal to its own principles. And that's why I'm running. You know, there are those in the Republican Party that just keep saying, well, all we need to do is elect more Republicans, elect more people with R's behind their names. And if we'll just do that, all will be right with the world. Well, I cannot be the only person in America who remembers the 2000s, when America entrusted itself to my party. America gave the Republicans the White House, the House of Representatives, the Senate, even the Supreme Court. And what did we get in return? The largest expansion of government in our nation's history. The fastest growth in spending, the fastest growth in debt, no bureaucrat left behind for our schools, the auto bailouts, the bank bailouts, and all of this was given to us by Republicans who called themselves conservatives. So I'm here tonight to tell you it's not enough to just elect a Republican. We have to elect true conservative Republicans. Now I'm going to open this up to you guys here in just a little bit, and I want you to be thinking of any questions you have, because everything's on the table. I think that's how a campaign should be. That you can ask whatever question you like, but I want you to know a little bit about me, and I think if you know a few things about me, I think you'll know how I think. First of all, I'm a doctor. I am not a politician. I do not want a career in politics. I would rather practice medicine. That's the calling of my life. You know, I've written a conservative column for the Washington Times for several years. I've done Fox News. I've traveled the country. I've traveled the state. I've spoken out to anyone who will listen because I care deeply about our country, but I've never wanted this career in politics. But I see that our country is in trouble. I believe we are in deep trouble. And when I look at that United States Senate, there are a few senators in particular that I think we need more of them. And in fact, if you start thinking of which senators you think we need more of, I'll bet you we're thinking of the same names right now. I think we need more senators like Ted Cruz. And like Mike Lee. And like Rand Paul. I'll tell you something interesting about them. I think it's a pretty interesting fact because it's interesting what people say about me. They say a whole lot of things about me. But one of the things they say about me is that I don't have enough experience to go to Washington. And I'll confess right now, I do not have any Washington experience. I have never run for office before. I do not have the kind of Washington experience that my opponent has. I have never raised your taxes. I have never spent trillions of dollars that did not belong to me. I have never paid $800 for a toilet seat. So I lack that kind of experience. I'll tell you the experience I do have. I have the experience of meeting a payroll, of balancing budgets, of creating jobs. But more important than that, I have the experience of knowing what it's like to have patients come to me and put their lives in my hands and ask me to make decisions that are humbling. They're difficult decisions, and they're the difference between life and death. I bear the scars to prove it. And I'll tell you, that's the kind of experience I'll take to Washington. I think we desperately need to re-embrace that idea in Washington, that citizen legislature, where people come from different walks of life, doctor, teacher, farmer, businessman, whatever it is. They bring their experiences to Washington, they serve for a short time, and then they go home, and they live under the laws they helped to create. I have pledged I will only serve 2 terms in the United States Senate. I believe in term limits. I believe the entire Congress should be term limited, and I will lead by example. And while I serve, by the way, I will continue to practice medicine right here in Kansas. Because again, that's what I want to do. That's my calling.
And I think it's also important, quite frankly, that anybody who goes to Washington should stay grounded in who they are. And when I finish my 2 terms, I'll come home and practice medicine full-time again, because I don't want that career. In fact, I think the era of the career politician has been a destructive time in America, that we have got to put an end to it. Now, a few things about me. I just want you to know some of these things in my heart that I just won't apologize for, the things that I believe. And I hope you'll bear with them. And in fact, I think when you hear these things, I think you'll kind of know how I think when it comes to policy matters. But first of all, I hope you'll indulge me. And I know I'll embarrass her, but I hope you'll say hello to my wife, Carrie. I'm standing right back here. Now, I grew up in Lyons, and Carrie grew up in Kansas City, which means, of course, now we live in Kansas City. Carrie and I have never made a secret of the fact that we were teenage parents. And it was one of the biggest challenges and the greatest blessings of our life. You know, I don't think we really understood it. Thank you. I don't think we really understood or appreciated that at the time. But God repeated that blessing just 3 years later. And now we have 2 wonderful children. And a couple months ago, Carrie and I celebrated our 23rd wedding anniversary together with 2 wonderful children. So it may not surprise you to know that I'm pro-life, and I won't apologize for being pro-life. I believe every baby deserves to be loved, and I believe every life matters. I believe your right to self-defense is God-given, and no one can take that away from you, no matter what man does, says, or writes. They cannot take away your right to self-defense. I believe every word in the Second Amendment means what it says. I believe the Second Amendment applies not just to militias, but to individuals. Carrie and I, in fact, are life members of the NRA. We both have our concealed carry licenses. I've heard, maybe you guys are aware of this, maybe you can share it with me. I heard there are a lot of rumors going around Kansas that I do not support the Second Amendment. Has anybody heard that from me? I gotta ask, I gotta know. If you have one of these emails, I hope you'll send it to me, because it's clearly not true. My first gun, I think, was given to me. I think it was a tradition of our family. We got our first gun when we were 10 years old. At Christmas time, when you're 10-year-old in the Wolf House, was a big deal. You know, Carrie and I, it kind of pains me to say it, I'll share this with you. Carrie and I, when we go to the range together, she usually outshoots me a little. It's really true. I remind people, it's not Texas you need to worry about. Don't mess with Carrie. I believe that America is the most generous nation on the earth. We always have been, we always will be, we always should be. But I believe that if you can work, then you should. I will not apologize for providing that. I've had a job also since I was about 10 years old. I've grown newspapers, I've set groceries, I've painted houses, I've mowed lawns, I've milked cows. I've trimmed Christmas trees in hot Julys. I'm not afraid to work. And I'm not afraid to tell people that they should work. Now look, America should always take care of every American who truly cannot take care of themselves. That's not a constitutional principle, it's a moral principle, but I think you probably agree with it. We should take care of every American who truly cannot take care of themselves. But those who choose to not work, and those who can work but choose not to, I have a simple message for them. They should get off their sofas, they should hang up their free Obama phones, and they should get a job. So I'm running for the United States Senate because I think our country's in trouble. And I think if we don't get this right now, I think we may be losing our chances to get it right. You remember President Reagan said, the freedom wasn't given to us through the bloodline. Our children don't simply inherit it from us. It has to be worked for and fought for every day. Or we will be that generation who has to explain to our children and our children's children what it was like in America when men and women once were free. Now, I grew up in Lyons. I won the lottery of life when it came to my mom and dad. And I also grew up, my formative years were the Reagan years. And I remember the Soviet Union at the time was always a constant feature in our lives. It was a constant feature in our thinking of what it was like to live in a Soviet Union compared to a free America. And I've watched our freedoms erode over that time. In fact, I think the downfall in our time has been when the Reagan Revolution gave way to that kinder, gentler GOP. There was a go-along and get-along GOP that just did everything they were told And instead of running off the cliff like the Democrats are attempting to do, the Republicans were satisfied with just walking off of the cliff instead. Either way, you end up at the bottom. You know, I remember thinking as a kid what it must have been like for the children of the first generation of communists, who must have, at some point, they had to have been asking their moms and dads, why did you let this happen? Why did our country turn out this way? Why didn't you do something? Because at that point, it was too late. And I'm afraid we're that generation in America right now. I'm afraid that if we don't realize that we are the sovereign citizens of the United States, that we the people, but I'm afraid we may lose our country. I mean, we may still have that word America on a map. It might even have the same boundaries, but it won't be America. It won't be that country that we've come to know. It won't be that country that made us great. And you know what made us great? We have the roadmap. This is not the most difficult thing in the world. It's like Reagan used to say. There are things that are simple. It doesn't mean they're easy. They're simple, but they're difficult. Well, it's simple, our roadmap. Number one, abide by the Constitution. Number two, re-embrace the American idea itself. That divinely inspired American idea of individual liberty, limited government, and free market values. That's what made America. That's what made America great. And when we've abandoned it, our country has suffered. And we've abandoned those principles. In fact, frankly, both parties have abandoned those principles. Now I'm going to go ahead and ask myself the first question, because I know the first question I always get is, why Pat Roberts? Why are you challenging Pat Roberts? Look, it's something personal. Like, I'm sure just about everybody here, I voted for him. I voted for him more times than I can remember. It's nothing personal against him. I'll never say anything personal about him or his character. I think this race should be about two things: his record and my vision. But the truth is, Pat Roberts has been in Washington too long. Pat Roberts has been in Washington for 47 years. 47 years. No one should be in Washington for 47 years. Moses himself should not be in Washington for 47 years. Because our founders got it right. They knew that we should have rotation in office. In fact, they knew, frankly, that our senators should actually live in the states that they represent. And Pat Roberts has forgotten even that. If you hadn't seen this, Pat Roberts hasn't lived in Kansas for 15 years. Until I announced in October of 2013, he didn't even keep a primary residence in Kansas. He claims he has a home. Frankly, that's not true. He owns rental property in Kansas. That's what he's owned for the last 15 years. He's had tenants living in that rental property. That's their home. He's a landlord, but that's not a home. He didn't bother to get a home in Kansas and reestablish his Kansas residency until October of 2013. And he did that by renting a room from a donor. Did you guys see this in the news? He rented a room from a donor, and he calls that a Kansas home. Now, he jokes about it when he was asked by the media. He said, well, I have full, and I'm quoting here, I have full access to the recliner. And he thinks this is a big joke. And I'm sorry. Article 1, Section 3 of the United States Constitution is no laughing matter. It's not a joke. There's a reason why our founders said that our senators should be inhabitants of the states. Because if they go to Washington and stay there for 47 years, they'll forget who they are. They'll forget who they represent. They'll forget the Kansas values that they were sent there to represent. And Pat Roberts has done just that. You know, a year ago, Pat Roberts voted for Barack Obama's $600 billion tax increase. And that affected 80% of Kansas families. Pat Roberts has voted to raise our debt ceiling. Not once or twice, but 11 different times. And here's the one that gets me. This one gets me because I see the effect of it in the hospital. I see the effect of it on my patients. Pat Roberts voted to put Kathleen Sebelius in charge of Obamacare. Now I got a question for you. If you are sitting in the United States Senate, Kathleen Sebelius comes before you and wants the job as the head of HHS to run Obamacare, would you vote for her? Show of hands. Who would vote for Kathleen Sebelius to run Obamacare? Not a single person. And you know what? Kathleen Sebelius has been an absolute disaster in Washington. But that shouldn't surprise any of us here, because she was an absolute disaster in Kansas. I think if Pat Roberts would have followed the Constitution, followed Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution, and lived in Kansas, I think he would have known that. And in fact, Kathleen Sebelius would not be the head of HHS if it wasn't for Pat Roberts. There were only 2 senators in that United States Senate who cast the 2 votes she needed, one in committee and one on the floor. That was the Northeastern Liberal Olympia Snow and our very own Pat Roberts. In fact, Pat Roberts publicly endorsed her. He ushered her nomination through the Senate, and then he voted for her not once but twice. Now, he voted against Obamacare, and I'll give him credit for that, but anybody can read a poll. But you know what? I don't think you can say that you are truly fighting against Obamacare when you are crowning the queen of Obamacare. You remember during her hearings, actually, they had to delay the vote a few days because she was not lying. She was lying under oath and trying to hide, remember this? Hide the money she was receiving from George Tiller, the Wichita third trimester abortionist. She was caught hiding that, lying under oath. They delayed her vote a few days. It was still okay with Pat Roberts. Pat Roberts still voted for her. No, I want to tell you something. I'll say it again. I think we need more senators like Ted Cruz and like Mike Lee and like Rand Paul. People who will fight for our values, actually stand up and fight for our Constitution instead of go along and get along like too many of our Republicans. And that's been the problem with our party. That's why I'm running. Now, there are a couple policy areas in particular I want to bring up, and then I want to turn it over to you. This is your night, it's not mine. I've heard myself talk too much. And believe me, Carrie has heard me talk way too much. But number one is health care. We have got to absolutely repeal every single word of Obamacare. Obamacare is by far the most destructive law in our lifetimes, and if we don't stop that law, it will destroy America. It fundamentally redefines the relationship between the government and the citizen. You know, the government's lost its place. They believe that they are our master instead of our servant. And it's no better, and there's no better example of that in Obamacare. They don't trust you to choose your own doctor. They don't trust you to choose your own insurance. I mean, heck, our government doesn't even trust you to buy your own light bulbs, or even how much water your toilet should flush. They have forgotten their place. And Obamacare is the most destructive law. We have to repeal it entirely. Now, what I keep hearing from the Democrats and from people in the media is that the Republicans don't have a plan. Well, so long as I'm here, I will personify that they're lying. Because I do have a plan. It's called patient care. Now, I've written this plan, we released it here in this campaign, but the truth is I've been talking about this stuff for years. I wrote a book about this in 2011 called First Do No Harm, in which it cataloged not just the problems with Obamacare, but how our health care system was in trouble before Obamacare, and better solutions than Obamacare. In fact, patient care has a simple name, because a health care system should not be centered around politicians. It should be centered around patients. And patient care has been described as by far the best alternative to Obamacare. The cornerstones of patient care are straightforward and simple: compassion and efficiency. You achieve compassion by allowing doctors and patients to make their own health care decisions. And you achieve efficiency through the power of the free market. The free market is the most powerful engine of human prosperity in the history of humankind. It's like Novocaine. Give it a chance, it will work every time. But we've seen it work in healthcare. We've seen it reduce costs in healthcare. And so I put forward this plan called patient care, and primarily that's insurance reform. And there are a whole number of aspects to it, but primarily the core of patient care is to say that your insurance should be personal, it should be portable, and it should be permanent. And what I mean by that is that it's personal. You choose your insurance that you want. You choose what you want to buy. No government official can force you to buy what you don't want to buy or prevent you from buying what you would like to buy. You choose. You're a sovereign citizen. You're an adult. It's time your government treats you like an adult. Now, if you have your own insurance policy, then it becomes portable, kind of like car insurance. Nobody ever gets stuck in a job they don't love because they have a bad driving record. And yet we allow that to happen in the healthcare system. We all know people who are stuck in jobs that they don't love. What cost that is to our economy, I don't think you can calculate it. But what cost that is to the human spirit should be disheartening to us all. To have someone stuck in a job because the government has set these kinds of rules. And your insurance should be permanent. As long as you pay your premiums, no one can ever take it away from you. Now, there are obviously other measures that need to be reformed. Lawsuit reform, tort reform. You need to be protected. Patients deserve to be protected from bad doctors. You should also be protected from bad lawyers whose lawsuits just drive up the cost for everybody. The other areas, We can go into as much depth of that later if you guys want to ask questions. But the other area is our tax code. Our tax code is so corrupt. You know, I'll tell you something. I'm probably one of the few people in this country who have actually stood toe-to-toe with Barack Obama. I've looked him in the eye, and I have told him that he's wrong. And I knew when I did that I'd pay a price. And I have. I've been harassed. My family's been harassed. They sent the IRS after us to harass us. They've audited us. Clean bill of health. And then the White House even tried to get me fired. And all that served to do was fire me up. Because a government should never have treated sovereign citizens in that way. And so when we talk about tax reform, it's very we have an IRS that oversees a 76,000-page code that is used to control our lives. We've gotten so used to it, we barely even recognize the degree to which they have control over us through this code. They reward you if you do what they want, and they punish you if you do what you'd rather do. They try to decide what car you should buy, or whether you should weatherproof your house, or whether the expense of your business is legitimate, or whether or not you can be a tax-free organization because they like you enough, or that they don't like you enough, then they won't. They're using the IRS as a club. They're using an IRS to be the arbiter of free speech. When they're auditing groups simply because of what they believe, then you know what? Then that IRS is too corrupt to exist anymore. I want to be the one who hangs the going out of business sign on the front door of the IRS. Let me tell you something. The reason I oppose the way our current government runs, I will say this: there's only one tax code I know that has one very important rule, where we all play by the same set of rules. I think that all of us could agree on that. All Americans should play by the same set of rules. Right now we have a crony system. If you have great lobbyists, they'll make sure your business expenses are deductible. They'll make sure that you get the breaks and all the benefits. You know, we had a CEO who sat as a top advisor to President Obama, whose company made $14 billion in profit, and in that year that he was a close advisor to the president, his corporation paid absolutely zero corporate taxes. Now that's not just bad economic policy, that's immoral. When they are able to create those kind of rules for themselves, and everyone else is paying the bills, there's a problem there. I'm going to tell you something. I oppose government-run health care really for the same reason I oppose our tax code. I think they're both immoral. I think it's immoral for the government to get between you and your doctor. I think it is immoral for the government to sit in judgment of who shall live and who shall die. And don't kid yourself, that's what they're doing. Do you remember this young girl who was in need of a lung transplant a year or so ago? Her name's Sarah Mernigan, 10 or 11 years old, just a few weeks too young, according to the government rules, to get a lung transplant. And so the family appealed to the government and said, please give her a lung transplant. The doctors say it will save her life. And it marched all the way up to Kathleen Sebelius. And Kathleen Sebelius sat in judgment of a young girl and was asked, does she live or does she die? Kathleen Sebelius said no. Now luckily a judge stepped in, reversed the decision. The young girl got her lung transplant. She's alive today. The doctors were right. The politicians were wrong. But Kathleen Sebelius was asked about it. Why did you turn down this girl who was in need of that lung transplant? She was under oath, and you know what she said? And I'll say it word for word. I'll say it quote exactly. Someone lives and someone dies. Now I say it is immoral for Kathleen Sebelius to sit in judgment of who shall live and who shall die. But the same thing is going on with our tax code and the way that our government is running our economy. You know, we're $17 trillion in debt, and that's the debt we admit to. It's probably closer to somewhere between $100 or $200 trillion when you look at all the unfunded obligations our government has. But $17 trillion in debt. You know, I think Mark Stein said it best. He said, when a nation spends trillions of dollars that are yet to be earned by a generation that's yet to be born, and that's no longer just a spending crisis or an economic crisis. It's a moral crisis. And I think that's what we've reached in America. I think we have lost our way. I think Washington has lost its way, and we're not going to change Washington until we change who we send to Washington. And I think it's time that we do that. That's why I'm running for the United States Senate. And I'll tell you something, it's been pretty exciting for us to be on the trail. Now, believe me, parts of it I would not wish on anybody. You know, I've been campaigning now for 5 months. I've actually been talking about public policy for years. Pat Roberts has been in Washington for 47 years. He's not running on his record. How do you run on raising Barack Obama's taxes and 11 debt ceiling increases, putting Kathleen Sebelius in charge of Obamacare? He's not running on my record. He's not running on any policy issue against me. He hasn't found a single issue that he says I'm wrong on. I keep waiting for it. Keep waiting to hear him say I'm wrong on one issue. Instead, he changes his issues to match mine. He changes his position to match mine. You may have heard that he claims he's one of the top conservatives in the Senate. You guys anybody heard that? And I got to laugh when I see it. He says he uses the numbers of rating out of Heritage Action. Now, Heritage Action is a great organization. And in 2013, they gave him a rating somewhere around 90. And so he uses that to claim he's the top 5 conservatives. Pat Roberts has been in Washington for 47 years, and he wants you to ignore and forget the first 46. He doesn't want you to know what his lifetime rating is at Heritage Action, because it's not 90 or 80 or 70. It's a 67. And in fact, before I came along, his rating in 2012 at Heritage Action was a 65. His rating at Club for Growth was a 55. His rating at FreedomWorks was a 54. And then overnight, all of a sudden, he gets challenged. And all of a sudden, he gets into the 90s. And I'm telling you something, when you go from the 50s to the 90s overnight, that is an amazing election year conversion. But let me tell you something. A real conservative does not need an election year conversion. A real conservative is conservative every year, every day, every vote. But instead what we see of Pat Roberts, 2013, we say he's on cruise control. He just looks over at Ted Cruz and votes that way. But when you go overnight from the 50s to the 90s, that's not just an election year conversion. It's an election year confession. It's a confession that he's failed us, that he's forgotten who he is. He's forgotten who he's supposed to represent. And I guess that happens to you after he's been in Washington for 47 years. You know what he's doing tonight? I think we should all wish him well. Tonight, while we're going to talk about some issues, he is at a $2,000 per lobbyist wine tasting in Washington, D.C. I'm not making that up. I don't think you can make that up. I don't think Kansans will be hanging out at $2,000 per lobbyist wine tastings in Washington, D.C. I can tell you I won't be hanging out at those. But look, there are serious things afoot. And our country's in serious trouble. And if we don't get these things right, we're losing the days in which we're going to have a chance to. And I'm afraid that Reagan would be right. That we'll have to explain to our children and our children's children what it was like in America when men and women were once free. So we've started this campaign. It's really been amazing, and for all the awfulness of it, for all the personal, vindictive attacks that they've had. If not a single issue he'll say I'm wrong on, all he has done so far is to attack my character. That's all he knows to do, because that's what Washington people do. And that's fine. I'll tell you something. I'm from Kansas. I live in Kansas. I do not back up, and I do not back down, and I will stand and fight. I will fight for our values. I'll fight for our Constitution. And when Barack Obama tried to intimidate me, I did not back down. And now that Pat Roberts is trying to intimidate me, I will not back down. And tomorrow and in the next year, when I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Rand Paul in that Senate, and Harry Reid or Mitch McConnell want us to back down, I will not back down. I will continue to fight. That we've had some amazing endorsements from across the state and across the country. Groups like the Flint Hills Tea Party and the Southeast Conservatives and the Kansas for Constitutional Integrity, the Kansas for Constitutional Government, the Republican Liberty Caucus, both in Kansas and nationally. Nationally, groups like the Senate Conservatives Fund have endorsed me. This is the group, of course, that was started by Senator Jim DeMint. And he started this so he could find more constitutional conservatives like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Rand Paul. And I'm so proud to say they've endorsed me. The Madison Project, which was founded by our former Congressman Jim Ryan, you know, the 4-minute miler, Jim Ryan, right? That they've endorsed me. He himself has endorsed. Conservatives around the country like Eric Erickson, and just last week, it was pretty exciting for me. I had no idea it was coming. The radio powerhouse, talk radio powerhouse, Mark Levin endorsed me. And I'll tell you, it's humbling and it's exciting all at the same time, but all of those endorsements really don't matter nearly as much as your endorsement. You know, I think Kansas 2014 is shaping up a lot like Texas 2012. Everyone in Texas in politics opposed Ted Cruz. They all said there was no way he could be elected, right up until the day he got elected. You know, almost every legislator in the Texas House endorsed his opponent. They did what the party told them to do. The governor and his administration, they were against Ted Cruz. The Bush family was against Ted Cruz. And now they're left to have to explain to their constituents why they oppose Ted Cruz. You know, Pat Roberts has done a great job securing the endorsement of every politician almost in Kansas, from governor on down to dog catcher. He can have it. He's playing to his base. He wants those politicians. Yeah, I want your endorsement. I want the endorsement of Kansas. I want the endorsement of we the people. I want the endorsement of people who realize that if we don't step up and do our job as sovereign citizens, that they'll never do it for us, and that it's our time. That it's our time to get control of Washington by sending people there who are mindful of what Washington should be, that our government should be the servant, not the master of the people. And so, you know, I'm going to open up to you guys, let you ask your questions. And if anything's on the table, I'm not sure, how did you want to do this? Did you want to walk around? Okay. So whatever question you have, I guess just raise your hand. And if you have any question in particular, love to answer it.
I would like to have a question. I didn't have it before. Assuming that you are the Kansas senator, and assuming that Justina Pelletier was a Kansas girl, and the Boston General Hospital, or the Boston Children's Hospital, stole her as a Kansas senator, how would you address that?
I'm not familiar with this case. Can you tell me what this case is?
It's a girl that they took her to the hospital in Boston, and her parents did, and they claim that it's psychology problem, and they basically the DCF took her, and her parents, the Boston hospitals had her for almost a year.
And is she from this area?
No, but it's a major national. Glenn Beck is one.
Okay. You know, and I don't know the details of that, so I guess I can't speak to that specific. Raising our children. It is our parents. Parents should be raising their children. Look, when a government steps in that way, and fortunately I haven't practiced the kind of medicine where I've had to deal with that. I know some of my pediatrician colleagues have had to deal with very difficult situations. And in all cases, the rights of the parents should be paramount. And of course, the rights of the child should be paramount. It is a dangerous game for the government to start getting in and believing that it can be the master of those situations. I don't know the specifics of that, and I don't want to comment specifically on something I don't know. But in general, parental rights and children's rights have to be paramount.
Dr. Wolf, Chuck Sankey. Today I read that our party here has had a couple of meetings on Common Core standards. Mm-hmm. And I read today that the Department of Education and the administration want to change the name. They don't want to change the program. They want to change the name, thereby trying to hoodwink the American population about the intrusion of government into education.
That's right.
Where are you on education for the youth of America?
First of all, we have to stop Common Core. And I don't care what you call it. Liberals start calling themselves progressives because they ruined the name liberal because their policies are ruinous. And it doesn't matter what you call it, we've got to stop it. And here's why. Look, the control of our Kansas schools should be by Kansas. This is not rocket science. This is not a difficult concept. You know, I'm a product of USD 405, public education, and proud of it. My wife Carrie is a product of public schools in Kansas City, and our kids were products of public schools. Almost every teacher I've ever come across, I've been proud to know. Some of them I probably got in trouble a few times too many of them. But our kids have had wonderful teachers, and I know as a kid I did too. And I trust our teachers, and I trust our teachers and our principals and our parents to make the decisions. Let me tell you this. I don't trust politicians and I don't trust bureaucrats to make these kinds of decisions. This experiment of the Department of Education, and I call it an experiment because it's a relatively new concept in American history, at least when we look at it with the long view. The Department of Education has been around since 1980. And since then, we have spent trillions of dollars. We have sent trillions of dollars through that building. They don't employ a single teacher. They don't have a single principal. They don't educate a single child. They don't have a single schoolhouse. And yet they spend trillions of dollars, and during that time, our education, I would say, has probably gone backwards, not forward. In fact, you certainly can say by standardized testing, we have flatlined. What have we gotten for those trillions of dollars? Now, it doesn't make any sense to me why we should take $1 from Kansas and send it to the Department of Education so that they can give us 80 cents back and tell us how to run our schools. Kansans should run Kansas schools. That experiment failed, and that building needs to be closed down, and all of those dollars need to be sent back to Kansas. And frankly, once that money gets back to Topeka, I would lobby that Topeka sends it to the school districts. And then I would lobby that the school district sends it to the schools. And I would lobby, frankly, that the dollar should fall to the child instead of the school building. Because if they did that, then the teachers and the principals would have to answer to the parents. And I'll tell you what will happen, is the great teachers will earn more, and bad teachers will be shown the door.
Dr. Wolf, Terry Dalton. I've truly enjoyed listening to you this evening, and I will tell you I do support you. There is one issue, though, that you haven't addressed, and I would like to know your position on immigration.
Oh, thank you. We have to physically secure our border. The first duty of government is to protect its citizenry. We have to physically secure our border. Let's be very clear about this. Ronald Reagan, I believe, by far was the best president in our lifetime, but he learned something the hard way. Let's not repeat that mistake. He said he gave amnesty away in return for a promise to physically secure that border. And that promise never came. It's like Democrats when they go to Republicans and say, hey, give us this tax increase today, and we promise you we'll cut spending tomorrow, but they never do. Sooner or later, Charlie Brown needs to quit kicking at that football because Lucy's going to pull it away every single time. That's our immigration policy. Here's what we need to do. Number one, physically secure that border. Number two, enforce the existing laws. Number three, no amnesty. And number four, we need to shut off these magnets that are pulling in people from other countries for our welfare system. That right there will solve our immigration problem more than anything else you can do. The question always arises, well, what do you do with all the folks who are here? 12 million, 15 million, nobody knows a number. Some people would say 30 million. Well, it doesn't matter until you physically secure that border. If you were to give amnesty, and I oppose that, but if you were to give amnesty to the 15 million today, and you don't physically secure that border, then tomorrow you'll have 15 million more, and you'll be right back where you started. And the other side, if you were to somehow deport every single one of them, but you don't secure that border, tomorrow they'll be right back, you'll be right back where you started. So there's no point in having a conversation about that until we physically secure that border. Now look, I think it's important to say, though, that immigration can make a nation strong. I believe in that concept of high walls and wide gates. We want immigrants to come here, but we want people who will come to America because they love America, and they're ready to work, and they yearn to breathe free. You know, if you'll obey our laws and you'll work, we'd really like to have you. We want you to sign the guest book first. And that's really what we're asking. Obey the laws. A nation cannot survive the kind of, the combination Milton Friedman said. You could either have open borders or you can have a welfare system, but you can't have both. You know? And we just can't survive this influx of people that our economy is already hanging by a thread. And then to have too many people who want to come in, not to work, but to receive. So we need to reform that system in that way. Who's up?
My name is Daniel Jackson, and my mother immigrated to this country from Germany in 1945, and my dad's parents immigrated from Ireland in 1944, so I agree with that. But earlier you said you was a constitutional Republican. I have 3 questions now, and I'll have Connie take the mic.
Why don't you give one question, and then if there's time, we'll come back. We're going to do one question from everyone.
All right. Under the Constitution, there's 3 amendments for voting, correct?
3 amendments.
There's 3 amendments detailing voting rights in America. So how can you, as a constitutional Republican, guarantee the right to vote to ex-convicts?
How can I, as a constitutional Republican, guarantee the right, didn't we catch that?
To ex-convicts? Yes, felons. Right now in the United States, felons cannot vote.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, there are certainly ways that you can surrender your rights in America. And I have no problem telling somebody if they've surrendered their rights, that they've surrendered their rights. All right. Next question.
Dr. Wolf, you mentioned your discussion with Barack Obama in person. Could you give us a little bit of details? Like, what year did that happen? What was the situation? I'm very curious.
Yeah, I will tell you this. I didn't realize that Barack Obama and I were related until about 2008. And in fact, kind of the coincidence is my mother was reading a newspaper article, and she had just happened to read that this senator from Illinois who was running for the president was describing his great-uncle, Charlie Payne, who had served in World War II. And my mom was reading this, and she's just flabbergasted because it's describing her uncle, Charlie Payne. And how can this be? Well, my mom grew up in Wichita, and she knew Barack Obama's mother as when they were both children. They were cousins. Now, actually, my mother was first cousin. I'm going to get the genealogy right. My mother and Barack Obama's grandmother, Madeline, were first cousins. Now, there's an age difference between the families, so my mother and Barack Obama's mother were of closer age, so they knew each other as young children. That family moved away, and believe me, my mom probably told me this story about 17 times before I ever even cared to listen, try to sort it all out. That family, the Dunham family, moved out of Kansas where they were still, well, she was still a young girl, still a child, entering youth, I don't know how old. And my mom had lost touch with her. The last she knew of Stanley Ann was that Stanley Ann had a son, but she didn't even know the son's name. But as she's reading that article, she realized that had to have been Stanley Ann's son. So she got on the phone, and sure enough. And I didn't meet him until 2010. I was driving in central Kansas and heading home to, let's see, where was I going at the time? I think I was coming to Hutchinson, actually, with Todd Teagard at a campaign event in 2010. I got a phone call, and there's somebody who says they're from the White House, and I thought, that's pretty funny. One of my buddies. I didn't really buy it, but they said the president's coming to Kansas City, would like to meet you. Now, by this point, I was already publicly opposed to him. By this point, of course, he's already the president, and I'm already his fiercest critic. And I felt like all those times when I heard my name called over the intercom in high school to come see the principal. In the details of that meeting, it was again in 2010. It was most of it was just family and frankly kind of generic family. I mean, it wasn't trying to make some kind of big confrontation or anything of that nature. He was kind to me, my family, kind to my kids. I mean, who wouldn't want to have their son or daughter have a chance to shake a hand with the United States president? And even if we don't respect the man or what he's done, we certainly respect the office. And so, that's an honor. And I don't share the details of the conversation. But there are certainly areas where President Barack Obama and I disagree. And in fact, I really don't think there's a darn thing he has said or done that I can tell you I agree with. I think he's the worst president of our lifetime. I think he's the worst president, perhaps even of our history. I agree with. In fact, it's the only thing I'm aware of that he has said publicly about me. And he has said I'm a nice guy. And I think they'll agree with that. I think he's probably right.
What is your position on cuts to the military?
I'll tell you what. America needs to stand up for our military. We need to have the absolute unrivaled, strongest military in the world. We're the only superpower, and we need to act like it. And what we're seeing going on in the world today should be a stark reminder of this. And Barack Obama is trying to gut our military in the face of a very dangerous world. And the first duty of government is to protect its citizens. And the first step in that is to have a strong military. And look, we need to have our soldiers' backs in the same way our soldiers have our backs. We need to treat them right. Anybody who volunteers to step in the line of fire for us, we need to stand up for them. And this is a personal thing for me. I want to tell you something. I get chided and said to not do this. I kind of do it anyway because I embarrass folks too often, I suppose. But our campaign treasurer is also my brother-in-law, and he was formerly in the United States Marine. My campaign manager, formerly in the United States Navy, and my campaign field director, formerly in the United States Air Force. So when I say we honor the military, I mean we honor the military, we honor our soldiers, we treat them right. For me, that starts by hiring them. Now, I've never served in the military myself, but I have served those who have served in the military. In my medical training, I trained partly in the VA hospital in Kansas City, and I also trained partly in Walter Reed in Washington. And it was an amazing thing. That's a life-changing experience, in fact. I saw young men, 10 years younger than me, come in who would come in from Iraq and were missing limbs. And these are amazing young men. And I'm telling you, I would go eat lunch with them every day. I never went to the doctor's lounge. I went to the cafeteria so I could eat with my friends, soldiers. And to a man, every single one of them missing a limb, and there they are. It was an amazing experience for me. I used to look at soldiers as the grown-ups and me as the kid. And now I'm seeing guys who are 10 years younger than me who have given so much for the country. And I'd sit there and talk with them every day. And to a man, every one of them just wanted to get back to their unit. I mean, these are amazing young people. They have our backs, and we've got to have their backs.
Thank you, Dr. Wolf, for fighting for our country. But,
thank you.
I'm wondering where your views on homeschooling.
On homeschooling? Yes. I am for homeschooling. Now, I'll tell you something. I immediately say if parents, teachers, and principals should be in charge, but primarily it's parents. I admire anybody who's homeschooled. Some of my nieces have been homeschooled. We didn't homeschool our own kids, and frankly, I just am amazed by people who do, because it's a huge challenge. And as we learn more about homeschooling through our nieces you realize the amazing networks that are created among homeschool parents. And then, of course, everyone realizes these kids who go through homeschool tend to be some of the best educated kids in the country. I mean, you see them competing at just amazing scales on a national level. Competing everywhere. And I don't mean not kids in public education, that was me. But you know, anybody who homeschools their kids, what an absolutely amazing commitment that parents like that have. I gotta share this with you if you don't mind, if you'll let me indulge just a little bit. I want to brag about my sister, Sarah. My sister Sarah and her husband Craig live in Chicago now, but we're from Lyons. They have 5 kids, all of them adopted, and all of them from different countries: India, China, Korea, and all of her kids were born deaf. And she brought these kids in, and they're amazing kids. Now, the oldest is now a young adult, and the youngest is in preschool. And she homeschooled all of them for a while, and then got them into schools where it actually, despite the hearing loss, started things with cochlear implants and learning how to do lip reading and all these kinds of amazing things, and ended up mainstreaming them through other schools, through the schools. And the amazing commitment, the absolutely amazing commitment the parents have for their kids is on display every time I see her kids. I have other nieces as well who've been involved in homeschooling. I have an enormous respect for it, and I'm frustrated every time I see the assault on homeschooling. We see this right now in this deportation case of a German family who wants nothing more than just to homeschool their kids. And they're probably going to be kicked out of our country because they simply want what's best for their own kids. And again, it's right back to where I started. Our government has lost its place. It's lost its way. It's forgotten that it should be our servant, not our master.
How important is it to you to have a consumption tax, like the fair tax, to replace the income tax?
You know what? I am so glad you said that, because I just now realized I always do this. I'm not one who reads notes while I speak. I just kind of speak from the heart. And I generally think that if you know what you believe and why you believe it, it's not hard to say it. But the problem is with that is sometimes I forget to say things. And when I was talking earlier at the beginning, I forgot to say that there's only one tax I'm aware of that follows that rule that I think we should follow, and that is where everyone plays by the same set of rules. Remember I said that earlier. I'm glad you brought it up. That one tax that I know, the one tax I support, is the fair tax. Capital F, capital T, fair tax. I'm not familiar with the fair tax, and I urge you to spend some time learning about it. When I first started reading about it, I was a little leery, and I think just because it's something I didn't quite understand. I understand what a flat tax is, and that is easy to conceptualize. And I thought, well, why don't we just want a flat tax? Because that would be simple. And a flat tax would be far superior to what we have now, especially if you start stripping away all these deductions, at least most of the deductions, so the government quits rewarding people for doing what they want them to do. Well, the problem is the fair tax. First of all, that's what we used to have in America. We started with the problem with the flat tax, The problem with flat tax. We used to have a flat tax in America, and it grew into the 76,000-page corrupt IRS code. It's better than what it is today, but why replace this corrupt code with something that will just grow right back into it? The other problem with the flat tax is that all of these groups have been audited, and all these groups have been targeted for their beliefs. They'd still be audited and targeted under a flat tax. When a government gets to decide who's tax exempt and who is not, or what you pay taxes on and what you don't,
That allows the government to have that kind of corruptive force on our economy and on our people. Now, the fair tax gets rid of every federal tax. No more federal income tax, no corporate tax, no capital gains tax. You know, the power to tax is the power to destroy. They're destroying our incomes, they're destroying our companies, and they're destroying our investments. Now, a consumption tax is the fair tax. You replace all of those with a tax on a retail tax on anything, any new purchase, on any service or any good, so long as it's new. We all would play by that same set of rules. For most of us, our taxes would go down. Now, the folks who are able to hide a lot of money, you know, overseas or through all kinds of, because they have, you know, throngs of lobbyists and tax accountants that can hide that, they can't hide that under a fair tax because we all buy things. We all buy groceries and houses and cars. And so we would all play by the same set of rules, and that's all I ask. We all play by the same set of rules. So absolutely in favor of the fair tax.